Halloween is almost upon us, so let's talk about some spooky monsters in Ultimate Bestiary, The Dreaded Accursed by Nord Games. Let's get into it. Here we have Ultimate Bestiary, The Dreaded Accursed for 5th edition. Love this cover art, by the way. You got the Lich raising the dead with some generals on either side. Very cool. And here we have the inside cover. All of the artwork, just like in Revenge of the Horde, is absolutely outstanding. And it's also set up in a very similar way as Revenge of the Horde, where you have different categories of the monsters, and each of those categories has basically more monsters to play around with. Although this time around there is a lot more variety, not just in the categories themselves, but also as subcategories, the specific monsters that you'll see. And it is in alphabetical order, and so we will start with the ghosts. This time around, you're getting a lot more lore, world building stuff before you get to the stats for the specific monsters, which I absolutely dig. I like that they kind of give you like a little story at the very beginning. They tell you a little bit about that monster, the origins, and then the environment. And of course, you have a lot more of these little notes spread throughout this book that pertain to that category. And then we actually get to encounters, so random tables depending on your CR that you can roll on or just choose, and then we get the actual monsters themselves. So we have things like the Phantom Servant, Horrific Countenance, the Phantom Hound, and I really do like this time around that beasts are actually included in that category. They're not just at the end of the book. Possessive Consciousness, a Phantom Steed, Lingering Waif, a Dreadful Spirit, Tortured Soul, Relentless Haunt, and that's it. And of course, as you go through the monsters, their challenge rating does go higher and higher. So for the ghosts, we have a final challenge rating of 12. And of course, you see that some of these have legendary actions, which is really cool. A lot of the monsters in here that are higher level are going to have legendary actions to play around with, which is a really nice bonus. Makes that creature a lot more interesting. And at the end of each category, you get a little bit of a story that deals with that monster, which is really cool. I didn't read all of them, but what I did read was actually top-notch and quite spooky. Next, we have Ghouls and Guests, and following the same format, we get a little blurb about the Ghouls and Guests, their origin, environment, and also role-playing ghouls. So there's a role-playing category at the very beginning for each of the categories. So when your adventurers meet that creature, so for example, if they meet a ghost, kind of gives you some tips on how to roleplay as that creature, what they're looking for, things that you might expect. So we get Stunted Ghoul and the Ghoul Nar, so very low challenge rating for those. In case you want to introduce that to a group, say you want to introduce it into Van Richten style type campaign. You have the Gargoyle, Isla Stalker, Dread Ghoul, the Bilemal Ghoul, the Night Hulk, looking pretty badass. Just like a big ginormous Hulk that's just ready to smash. The Ghoul Sophisticate. Yeah, Ravenous Creeper, the Bitter Gas, Ferocious Gas, Infectious Ravener, all climbing up in that challenge rating. Noxious Devourer, Gassed Warlord, look how creepy that is. I mean, adult face and like just a skinny body with long arms. Ugh. And then, of course, we get a little story about ghouls. So, really cool. And probably what a lot of people, I imagine, would be getting this book for, liches. Here's the thing about the liches. Let's go through all these liches first. So we start with the Apocryphal Lich Neophyte, the Apocryphal Lich Initiate, the Apocryphal Lich Adept, the Apocryphal Lich Magus, the Apocryphal Lich Master is the final one at a challenge rating of 23. There's more, but here's my thing about the Lich category in of itself. It doesn't really explain what the difference is between the subcategories. So we have the apocryphal liches first, and I like that they still have like some lower challenge rating liches, like the neophyte, and then we keep going up: the initiate, the adept, the magus, and then finally the master. I like how that's set up, and it's pretty easy to see how they split that up and why. I mean, their spells are going to be different. The amount of legendary actions are going to be different. Just like how they function overall is going to be different. But then when you get to the Blight Lich Neophyte, there's no discernible difference other than, spells. Like, why? What makes a Blight Lich? That's something that I wish they had explained. Like, what is an apocryphal Lich? Like, where would you find those? I mean, obviously by the picture, I can probably guess that it's some sort of a druid lich, but it's never outright mentioned there. So that's kind of a point taken away from the writers of the book, in my opinion. I mean, I really like lore and stuff like that, and I really would have loved to have known like what the differences of the different liches are, or at least their categories. So next we have the Profane Lynches. Looks like oh gosh, I can't even remember what adventure it was. It's in the Tales of the Yawning Portal. There's an adventure that kind of reminds me of that. Then we have the Lich Master, which always seems to cap out at level or challenge rating 23. But I really do like and appreciate the artwork for each of the liches and how they kind of differentiate the different categories of the liches. So there is that. I have to give them a point for that. And then, of course, we have a little story about liches. Next, we get into lycanthropes. So if you like changing into a beast, then this is probably where you're going to be. Or if you want to heavily feature lycanthropy and, people changing into beasts, this is where you would go. So you get a nice little blurb about suppressing lycanthropy. It's possible in case one of your players does turn into a lycanthrope. But we start off with the werebat at a challenge rating 3, a werebear, a protector, and a devotee, a werepanther, a wereraven, a werewolf, mauler, and a dire werewolf, an alpha werewolf for those that want a little bit of a challenge or to flesh out their pack, and then we get like to lycanthropy archetypes, which is pretty cool. So you can actually become a lycanthropy or lycanthrope, which we'll actually find out later towards the back of the book at the different characters classes that you can become. A nice little blurb about werewolves. And then we have Mongrel Folk. And I actually totally forgot about Mongrel Folk until I started playing Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. It just came out a little while ago. And one of the characters is kind of a Mongrel Folk. And so a Mongrel Folk is basically a humanoid person who has characteristics of animals in them. Like, not a lycanthrope. They don't turn into that animal. They just have those characteristics like all the time. Some would probably consider them to be freaks or mutants, but that is the world of the Mongrel Folk. So we have a Mite, a standard Mongrel Folk, which is at a challenge rating 1/4, a Thug, Warrior, and a Brute. And you can actually build your own Mongrel Folk, which is really cool. The only thing I will say, I realize this table is here for, a very specific saving room purpose. I would have liked to have seen like a table for head, a separate table for torso, a separate table for arms. That way we don't get like this 3-page spread of, the tables or this table here. But oh well. It is what it is, and it's pretty easy to figure out. I mean, you're only rolling like a d4 to figure out what part you're adding and rolling a d20 for all 4 of the categories there. So it's really easy to figure out. I shouldn't really complain about it too much, but it is pretty cool that you can build your own Mongrel Folk. I really dig that. It really makes interesting NPCs, characters, and stuff like that. Then we get to Mummies. Really cool that they've included mummies. I've never really played around with mummies. I've never really done dungeon delves that have mummies, but I certainly would with all of these different options. So you have things like Mummy Soldier, the Praetorian, a Chosen Champion, a Mummified Murderer, a Royal Assassin, the Executioner Confidant, a Mummy Acolyte, the court priest, hierophant, and then you get the anointed king. And that's it. Oh, I guess you get a mummified baboon, hound, and cursed snakes too. But one thing that is missing, that I'm actually really surprised is missing, where's the queen? Like, really? You got a king and like the assassin, the court priest, but you got no queen? Really? Come on. You do get a blurb about Mummy Rot at the very beginning, though, which is pretty cool. Mummy Rot is one of those standard, Dungeons and Dragons tropey curses that you can get infected with. So that's pretty cool that they really do specify what it does here for when you get the Mummy Rot. You get attacked by a mummy and then you get the Mummy Rot. So further mummified animals, just pretty interesting. But oh well, no mummified queen. Revenants. So people who've been brought back from the dead and still possess their will and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, those are the Revenants. So you have things like the Revenant Seeker, a Tenacious Revenant, probably Tenacious D Revenant, Relentless Harrier, Failed Revenant. Yeah, I guess you can actually fail at that, being a Revenant. But very interesting. Their little lore was fairly interesting as well. I don't really remember much from it because it has been a long time since I've read through this book, but very cool stuff. Just some different things from the monster manual, because I think the monster manual really only has like one type of Revenant. So it's really cool to have some different types spread throughout different challenge ratings, although I kind of really wish they would have put the Failed Revenant in before the Relentless Harrier because of their challenge ratings, but oh well. Got a nice story about the Revenants as well. And then Shadows. So this one's a little bit perplexing for me. Like, Shadows, that just kind of seems, standardized. That seems kind of, given. So you have different Shadows, and I really don't see a reason why there should be. But I guess if you're looking for something with a lower challenge rating or a higher challenge rating, then I guess your Shadows are going to get more complex and stronger. So you have a Silhouette Shadow, Treacherous Shadow, Consuming Darkness, and that is actually it. So you got 3 types of shadows here. And it's not really a whole lot. But then again, for shadows, there really shouldn't be a whole lot because it's just, it's a given. It's a creature that follows behind you and masks as your shadow. I mean, what more can be said? And I'm actually really surprised that it's in this book. But hey, if you need more creepy things for your higher level characters, then there you go. Next off, we have skeletons. So everybody's favorite standard undead type enemy, second to zombies. Skeletons are pretty cool because you get a whole ton of different skeletons, like the warrior, the soldier, the veteran, going up in different challenge ratings, skeleton infantry, the pikener, the pike master, archer, marksman, sharpshooter, the hill giant, which is pretty cool. It's a large or a huge undead creature for your 5th level characters, a minotaur warrior, a minotaur warlord, and then you got skeletal dragons. So you got a lot of different skeletons to play around with, even skeletal animals, which is pretty cool. Bone horrors, a war titan. It's another huge undead at challenge rating 20 with some legendary actions. So yeah, don't get kicked by that thing, by the way. But really cool that there's just a ton of different skeletons. I really do appreciate that because in the monster manual, there's like only a handful to play around with. Spectres is the next category, and Spectres kind of like the Shadows. It's kind of like a gimme in a sense. Although, if I remember correctly, Spectres tend to be higher level, but you do get some options for lower challenge ratings like 1, 4, 12, and it keeps going up. 9, 16 is the highest here. So they do keep going. They do keep climbing up in complexity, which is pretty cool. So Traversing Spectre, Deadly Spectre, Spectral Horror, Spectral Raven, and a Spectral Dragon. So pretty cool options to play around with. If you're looking for more spectrals, I have never really played with a specter before, so there is that. Then we have vampires. So another category that I think a lot of people would really appreciate. So there's going to be different vampires, and of course you do get the whole lore and origin story of vampires. You got fledglings, Dampir, Night Stalker, which is really cool, the Pack Runner, the Noble, Ancient Vampire. So a lot of different stats and actions for that, which is really cool. Challenge rating 21. Could be a really cool bad guy, or if you're running a Van Richten style play, could be really cool to have one of those higher level. And then of course you get the explanation of the archetypes. So in case you want to build a vampire yourself, you have those options there for you. Whites is another awkward category for me, just because I don't really see myself using them all that much. But hey, they're here. You got a white tracker, hunter, slayer of the living, and the white warrior. Champion, executioner, malignant. Kind of weird that the whites kind of start their challenge ratings over again. I kind of really wish they had just kept it, in terms of challenge rating, just keep going up higher. Keep the lower ratings at the beginning and then the higher ratings towards the end. Oathsworn Annihilator, and then the Frost White. Challenge rating 16. So if you are looking for something different in your undead, then the whites I think would be a pretty good option to throw in there. Willow the Wisps or Willow Wisps are also a really niche category, I think. Just because they're there. You already use Willow the Wisps. I don't really think there needs to be differences between the Willow Wisps, but they're here. We got Ghost Flame, Wisp of Yearning, and the Red Wisp. So 3 different wisps for you to play around with different challenge ratings. I'll admit that. So if you're looking for something higher level, then you have the Red Wisp. If you're looking for something that's, not very beginning, but still at an acceptable challenge rating, you have the Wisp of Yearning. And then the Ghost Flame is just a challenge rating 2. But there you go. But if I remember correctly in the Monster Manual, Wisps are still quite the contender to be with. You have Wraiths as the next category. So another niche category. You have the Hateful Wraith, the Baleful Void, Seething Oblivion, the Bright Wraith, which is actually pretty cool. That reminds me of Shadows of Mordor right there. Bright Moat, and that is it. Nothing really needs to be said about that other than you have more undead to play around with. Different unique undead, I guess. So if you're looking for something unique, then that's more of a higher level, then the Wraiths would be an excellent option. Zombies, so everybody's favorite. You have them here. They are sorted between different CRs. You have a little blurb about plague-borne zombies and the necrosis disease, which is pretty cool. So we have human zombies, plague-borne human, human plague host. Then we get to the elf zombies, which is pretty cool that they actually added a different zombie based on the race of that zombie, which is I find very interesting. So we have the whole elves here. Then we have some dwarves here. And then we kind of get into like some of the monsters like goblins, which is fine. Like, if you have a zombie plague, then I think having some of the monsters in the surrounding area also be infected would also be a really interesting idea. But I wish that they had included some more of the player races like Dragonborn. But I also recognize that, Nord Games is probably limited by the open game license. So they probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But we do have hobgoblins and orcs. I mean, terrifying orc zombies. That's actually pretty cool, in my opinion. Ogre zombies, so like large type creatures reaching out to grab you so they can just eat you, kind of like a Titan from Attack on Titan. That's actually scary. And trolls, same deal. Oh. And then you have like your zombie dragons. So all of that's probably going to get fleshed out in the next Dungeons and Dragons dragon book. But oh well, they're here. It's been around for a long time. And then, of course, you have zombie animals. And I actually like this picture of the zombie horse with the little leg of the rider still attached to the stirrup. Ooh, swarm of plague-touched rats. Ooh, man. Scary. I mean, I'd be scared if I saw any type of, like, just a group of animals just trying to get to me. So, there you go. Now, I meant to say that there's a little blurb here about the Plague Swarm Infestation. So if you're looking for, a big group of a swarm, then you would roll like 1d8 swarms for a huge swarm. That's actually pretty cool. And then you have the appendices. So we have animated objects. So very creepy if you're in a mansion, and then you start seeing all of this stuff just walking around. You have possessed armor, pretty cool. Ghostly stagecoach, a hitched scarecrow, a jack-o'-lantern, challenge rating 8. Like, really? Okay. Just smash that pumpkin. But, oh well. Enchanted flying swords, sentient swords, scorched effigy, Ushabti, divine tomb guardian. So you got all of these really cool different animated objects that you could play around with. Ghost ship, which is also pretty cool. I think that's also been in Saltmarsh, but oh well. And then you have your player options, which is really cool, especially if you're trying to do a Von Richten style play and you're maybe wanting something a little different other than your standard mortal player characters. So yes, you can play as a lich, although I would probably regulate that a little bit. You can play as a lycanthrope or lycanthrope. Different types from wereboar, werepanther, wererat, wereraven, and all of that jazz. Could be a vampire, which I believe was also stated out in Van Richten's, but oh well. This book has been around since before then. You become an awakened dead, a ghast, a mongrel folk would also be very interesting options. And then you have some player templates, like becoming a ghost, maybe you die, and becoming a revenant. And of course, at the very end, we have your layer maps, which is not very useful in a book, but they're still here for you to draw out. And very cool this time around. They're actually really interesting, whereas in Revenge of the Horde, it was just all, wide open spaces. And of course, at the back, you have the index of all of the creatures. So very, very cool, interesting book, just filled with different monsters. So I really appreciate that. Feel free to leave a comment down below, give this video a huge thumbs up to support the series, and subscribe if you want to see more. I will see you guys in the next video.